Good night, good night, good night. And thanks again for logging on. We are back at relationships again. And this time we're taking a look at feminism, as you might have guessed. And this time, though, I want to look at a few videos where you're going to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. You're going to hear it from two people, or maybe three, depending on how many videos we are able to get through. But I want to take a look at one of the videos, or a couple videos from Dr. Jordan Peterson. And some of you guys might know him. He's a fairly popular psychologist and public speaker, and he has come to prominence over the last recent years, maybe last 5 years or so, and has been all over the internet speaking about different aspects of life and so on. He may or may not be a Christian. I think he's leaning towards the Christian side. But what he's going to be talking about in the videos that I'm looking at is not so much Christianity, but very much about feminism. And he's going to be talking about some of his observations with females over the course of their lives, etc. Very, very interesting stuff. And I think it is a perfect illustration of many of the things that we have been talking about, right? So the videos are a bit long. They might take a little longer than normal. We'll see how it goes, but let's start off with the first one. And after we listen to him, there are a few more videos I want you to see for yourselves. Quite interesting stuff. So let's start off with the first one.
The fundamental issue is that this image has to be held up as transcendent, and by that I mean it's an image that's got to be at the basis of a value structure that actually works insofar as there's going to be human beings, because there aren't any human beings without the infant and the mother. And so if that's not held up as an image of ultimate value, then everything falls apart. And it's something our culture does extraordinarily badly. I had a client recently admit to me in ashamed tones that she wanted to have children. I said, well, you don't have to be ashamed of that, especially not if you're talking to me. And she said, oh, that's such a relief, because I can't talk to anyone about it at work. They seem to think that it's, degrading. I thought that you can hardly diagnose a culture as more pathological than that. That's so appalling, and it's so hard. It's one of the things I really feel badly for young women, because they're not guided through this with any sense whatsoever. And I'll tell you what my experience has been working with women, and you can take this for what it's worth.
All right, so first of all, let's jump in real quick before he gets going, because he's going to get going. I just want to point out that, again, while he's not specifically referencing feminism, that's exactly what he's referencing, because he's talking about society. He's saying, hey, society is now pushing a narrative that is anti-children, anti-women having children, anti-family, etc. And what's that? That's feminism. That's what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Basically, feminism has been pushing down the throats of all the people, especially the young girls, that being a mother is a low thing. It's almost something to be avoided. It's something that gets in the way of your rise to fame and your rise in the corporate structure. And it is something to be neglected and avoided. It's not to your benefit. It's no good. And he's saying that, so obviously this is part of a lecture. We are coming in somewhat in the middle of it. And he's talking about these different images and symbols. And in particular, he's saying this symbol here with the mother and her child is an important symbol to have in the narrative of your society. It is something to hold up and to raise up in the consciousness of the society. You want people to value a mother and child. You want people to see that this is a good thing to do and something to aspire to. Why? Because if you don't do that, you're going to have a situation where the society starts to collapse, starts to crumble, because you won't have people having children, which is exactly what's happening now. So he's just saying, for a society to work properly, you need to have at the basis of it, well, you need to have many things at the basis of it. But one of those things is the idea that women having children is not bad. Women having children is very good. Okay? So that's kind of what he's saying. Anyhow, let's look at this next part.
And I've worked with women who've achieved the highest levels of their profession. I don't mean just in academia, but in a number of different fields. This is what happens. We'll take the typical woman, conservative woman, because they're more typical, conscientious, not particularly open. So they're dutiful people. You know, they're existing within the structures of their society. So I'll take female lawyers as a classic example. So they're very good at high school, very hardworking, very intelligent, but very dutiful, and often rather agreeable. And that's important because it means to some degree that they want to please and they'll do what they're told. And so part of the reason I think that women are outperforming men in elementary, junior high school, and university is because they're more likely to be obedient. Their women are very good in high school, then they go to college, they're very good in college. They nail their damn grades, they do their studying, they get their A's, and they ace their LSATs, so they're smart too. Then they go off to do their articling and they're really, really good at it. And then they get offered an associate position and they're really, really good at it. And then by the time they're 30, they make partner. And let's say they're in high pressure, high paying jobs. $250,000 a year, $300,000 a year, $500 an hour. Okay, what's your life like? You work all the time, period. 70 hours a week, 75 hours a week, flat out, and you don't get to make any mistakes. And if your client calls you at 3 in the morning on Sunday, you say, I'm really glad to hear from you, because if you don't, there's some hot law firm in New York that'll take your client from you at a moment's notice. And the client is paying you whatever, the firm, $750 an hour, of which maybe you get $350, and what they want is an answer about something really complicated right bloody now. And you can say all you want about the fact that women have a difficult time with that because it's a male-dominant patriarchy. Any female lawyer who's hit 30 and is a partner that has any sense at all knows that's complete bloody rubbish. It's market determined right to the core. What happens to the women when they're in their 30s? They all leave the high-end law firms. Why? Because who in their right mind would want to live like that? That's the issue, right? Once you make about $60,000 a year for your family, but let's say for you personally, additional income has zero impact on your quality of life. Zero. So why work 80 hours a week? Well, men will do it, some men, very few. A handful of hyper-competitive men who are obsessed with hitting the pinnacle of the given dominance hierarchy they're in will happily work 80 hours a week, and they'll forego everything else. Relationships, family, children, way in the second category. And so those men are often very difficult to live with too, because they're so obsessed with their career. It's hard to have a relationship with them. And maybe they don't have much of a relationship with their kids, but they're damn good at what they do. And part of that is they're smart and disciplined, and they'll work non-stop all the time. It's like an obsession. And that's the sort of people who run things. Those are the people who run things. So the women hit that at 30 and they're completely qualified, and the law firms are bloody desperate to keep them, because it's really hard to find highly qualified people, especially once you've put all that time into training them, especially if they're also good at bringing in business. The law firms trip over themselves to try to keep them. They can't. The women think, why in the world am I doing this? Why in the world would anyone in their right mind do this? Especially because they're often married by that point too, and generally they've married a husband who makes as much money or more than them. So they don't need the damn money. And so they think, well, there's more to life than this, which is exactly the right thing to think. And so they go and find a job that's 9 to 5 and controllable, so that they can hire a nanny and have some kids and have a life. And it's like, yes, that's the intelligent thing to do. So we've got things backwards in our culture. We're thinking, at least in part, why aren't there more women in positions of power? Wrong question. The right question is, why are there any men at all who want those positions of power? Because it's not just positions of power. You have to be such a knothead to think that. Oh, it's a position of power. It's like, sure, but it's a position of overwhelming responsibility. And if you make mistakes, you're done. Right? It's not like you occupy that position of power and everyone does what they're told all the time and your life is easy. It's like, forget about that. People are on your case to do exactly the right thing all the time, 100% of the time. And maybe you want that and maybe you don't. So I don't know what people think is these people are all sitting in their offices with their feet up on the desk, smoking cigars and oppressing the world. It's like, that isn't how it works. Those people, they work flat out all the time. So, and it's fine if that's what you want, and some people are like that. They're hyper-industrious people, right, from a trait perspective, no matter where you put them. If you put them in a forest with an axe, they just wander around chopping down trees nonstop, right, because it's built into them. But if you want to have a balanced life, and you should want that, because the other thing you'll find, and this is God's gospel truth, is that the older you get, if you have any sense at all, the more important your family is to you. Like the utility of your career, maybe that peaks around 35 or 40, and it starts to decline pretty rapidly after that. And what happens, if you're fortunate, you have someone in your life that you love, that you've woven yourself together with, and you have some kids so that you have something to do from the time you're 50 till the time you're 80.
Okay, so what's he talking about? He's talking about, so remember at one point we were saying, let's pull it up real quickly. I'm jumping here to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 8. So let's read. I desire therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. In like manner also that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. And I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Okay. Verse 13, again, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Now, so obviously this is Paul talking to Timothy about Adam and Eve. And we know that Eve was the person that the devil approached. The devil came to Eve, talking to her, trying to convince her of stuff, trying to deceive her, which she did successfully. Even though she did that, that wasn't the real fall of mankind. The real fall of mankind was when Adam actually listened to her, took of the fruit and ate likewise. And then everything came to a screeching halt and everything collapsed from there. So really, Adam is the responsible one. But what I'm looking at right here is that part in verse 14, which identifies for us that the devil was targeting Eve. The devil was trying to trick Eve. He recognized what she was like. She recognized what Adam was like. And he thought to himself, the best target here with these lies and these tricks is this lady here. I'm going to try to bamboozle her. I'm going to try to entice her to become great with my doctrine. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Now, as we've said 100 times over, John chapter 8, verse 44, the devil is a liar. That's one of the principal modes of his attacks. And feminism is just another lie, all right? And the lie of feminism is the same lie that the devil gave to Eve. You can be great. You can go outside of God's parameters. You can go outside of God's boundaries, and you can ascend to the stars. You can be great. You can be like the Most High. You will be like God, okay? That's all feminism is. Feminism is the very same thing. It's the devil coming. It's an enticement based in pride, and it is tugging at the pride and self-worship inside of every man. He's saying you can be great. You can worship yourself. You can be like God. Okay, that's what feminism basically is. And what Peterson is here talking about, he's saying, look, society, he says, but really speaking about feminism, he says society has failed the girls, teaching them that basically the most important thing is their career. And they don't guide the girls properly through all the complexities and all the realities of life. Okay? So these girls go through college with their feminist dogma in their minds, and they're just listening to all the narrative that is coming at them. And they just go through school doing well. I like how he says they don't take a second to look up or to ask any questions. They're just good girls doing what they're supposed to be doing what their teachers are telling them to do, doing what their parents are telling them to do. They don't know that their parents and their teachers and society at large has been tricked into believing this feminist lie. So they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And then all of a sudden, they find themselves operating on the highest level of the corporate game, and they're producing extremely high, and they're at the top of their careers, if you will. But then all of a sudden, they recognize, what's going on here? this can't be all there is to life. And then all of a sudden, they start to panic and they start to either try to get married if they're not married already, try to have children if they don't have children, and they try to cut back on their jobs and on their time spent out there in the corporate world, and they want to spend more time with their children and their families. Because God made women like that. God made women with an instinct to have children and an instinct to care and nurture for children. That's our natural programming. Feminism is trying to fight people, fight women to deny their natural programming, deny what they naturally are inclined to, and try to impose on them an alien doctrine saying, hey, you can be a man. Where did that come from? That comes from hell. Again, notice how he said that generally by the time you get to 35, 40, around there is when your career will peak. That's when you might be making the most money. That's when you might be at your highest level. Okay? So imagine you doing all your work through all your years, all school and so on, and you come up to 40 and you finally get to that place where you're really dominating in your career and you're doing very, very well. But then you don't have any family. But then you don't have any children. What are you going to do for the rest of your life, right? I think he explains this idea even better in the next clip. So let's take a look at that.
You see the ONS data that came out a couple of weeks ago that said for the first time ever since records began, 50.1% of women are childless by 30. So there are more women without children at 30 than there are women with children. The first time ever.
Well, so this is, somebody clipped a part of one of my podcasts, I believe it was, where I was talking about what our society does to 19-year-old women or 18-year-old women, 19-year-old women. We just lie to them all the time. You know, the first lie is there's nothing more important than your career, more or less by definition. So that's the first lie. The second lie is there will be nothing more important to you in your life than your career. So that's the second lie. And then the third lie is there should be nothing more important in your life than your career. So that's the third lie. And then implicit in that is the idea that children are a burden, and that the idea that women should have children is part of the oppressive patriarchy and should be resisted. And who are men to tell me what I can do with my body? And hey, fair enough, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've worked in female-dominated occupations my entire life. For example, I worked as a daycare worker way back when that was like 1980, something like that. And there were no men doing that, but I really liked kids, and so that was fun. And I worked for social services in Alberta in the childcare department, and then I've been working as a psychologist, either training or as a psychologist since then, and that's been a female-dominated enterprise increasingly as the years went by. But even when I first entered it, so I'm in the post-female in the workplace generation firmly. I never experienced the world except as that, and so I've watched women progress through their professional careers at every level of attainment, from the lowest to the highest, and observed what happened, and relatively, I would say, bias-free, because I didn't know. And what I've seen is that as women progress towards their late 20s, there's a psychological transformation, and what happens is that they place less emphasis on their career and way more emphasis, particularly on having a child. And that really reaches a crisis point around 29 or 30 for the vast majority of women, and their attitude flips. And I've seen it flip very dramatically with many women. And I suppose the most single most convincing evidence of that, I worked with high-end lawyers in Toronto for about 10 years. I was part of an organization. We went to law firms, high-end law firms, and said, send us your most productive people, and we'll help them iron out whatever wrinkles there might still be in their life. And the advantage to them is that things will go better for them, and the advantage to you is they'll be even more productive. And there's a good management dictum, which is pay the most attention to your most productive people, because they're bringing in the bulk of your revenue disproportionately. And so I worked with men and women who were at the peak of their careers in a very difficult enterprise. And so these were women who were generally very attractive, well put together physically, pretty stable psychologically, extremely conscientious, very, very smart, and high achieving from like junior high all the way through high school, university, law school, onto the top firms, rocketing up through the ranks, full partnership by the time they were 29 or 30. And all the law firms, all the women bailed out, all of them. The law firms couldn't keep them. And I was really, and I talked to the women a lot about this because I was very interested in it, because I knew the law firms were bending themselves over backwards and tying themselves into knots trying to retain these women, because why wouldn't they? Just being greedy capitalists is enough. They don't want to lose their high-performing women because they're performing at the highest level, and they couldn't keep them. The women wanted to have 9-to-5 jobs. They wanted to bind the job so they could have a life, and that was especially true once they got interested in having a child or had one. And what they really came to was a very interesting realization. So because they were highly conscientious women, they sort of did their duty and worked hard and diligently and didn't pop their head up to ask questions. They're in junior high, they got the best grades. They were in high school, they got the best grades, and so on, all the way through, right till they reached partnership. But that's sort of an apogee, right? You hit partnership in a senior law firm, it's like you're at the top of your profession. Well, then what? Well, so then they looked around and they thought, here I am with all these like hyper-competitive men, perfectly willing to work 80 hours a week, nonstop, to stay at the top. What the hell are they doing? Because that's the real question. What is it that characterizes this small percentage of hyper-competitive men? It's not. You can assume that that's how everyone should be, but first of all, that isn't how everyone is. Or you can flip that and say, well, there's only a small minority of human beings that are willing to do this, to work flat out 8 hours a week. I mean, they're certainly being paid for it. Let's make no mistake about that. But well, what about the rest of life? Well, that's what the women asked. Why am I doing this? And that's a great question. Well, for men, there's a different answer than for women. It's a really different answer. And it isn't like the men are exactly thinking this through. It's more like this is an integral part of male motivation. The more successful you are as a man, the more women like you.
Well, the problem that you have now is that as women are getting better educated, with more employment, more status, more prestige, they compete themselves out of their ability to find an attractive mate. As women raise up through the dominance hierarchy, and this is...
Competence hierarchy,
sorry.
That's okay.
Who's going to tell women the equal access to opportunity that you have recently just acquired? Actually, what that's doing is it's making it more difficult for you to find a mate that you're fundamentally attracted to.
Yeah, well, it does a lot of things. I mean, it does provide women with...
So I just wanted to comment quickly on something he said there. So he is speaking in this video, referencing probably the last video. He has so many videos online. It could be a number of different times that he could have said that. So he's likely referencing the video that we just watched. But this last part here that he's talking about is very interesting. Of course, he said, okay, they're not interested in working extremely long hours, extremely tough, demanding, competitive, high caliber jobs, 80 hours a week. For what? That's not a good balance of life. That's not natural. That's not what I want to be doing with my life. And as a result, all of the women, all of these very, very smart, very, very competitive, very highly educated women say to themselves, I'm out, right? Like, I'm not dealing with this here. I want to find a work-life balance that makes more sense. I want to have children. I want to have a family. I don't want to be in here just pressing on work all day, all the time. For what point? And then the last video, he says, after a person reaches, I think he said $60,000 a year, their quality of life is no longer improved by more money. So if you make 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever, your actual quality of life doesn't really, skyrocket according to how much money you make, right? Basically, once you're making a certain amount, most people are very happy. So he's saying these girls are not into that. But on the other hand, the men don't have the same conflict. Because they're not the same creature. And he just pointed out, he says, men, as they make more money, they become more attractive to women. There's an internal drive inside of men to perform like that. And it's not all men that perform at that extremely high level. It's only a few men that become extremely obsessive and extremely dedicated to things. So you remember people like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, people that are absolutely fanatical about what they do. And they would go earlier than everyone and stay later than everyone and do 1,000 of this and 500 of that. And they hire the best coaches. And, they got so many men in the NBA. All of them excellent athletes. You know this because when you see NBA players that you never heard about on YouTube, 10 years after they leave the NBA, playing regular guys on the courts in the cities and so on, these low-quality NBA players are completely trashing. These old, out-of-order, out-of-shape, low-quality NBA players are completely trashing these other people, okay? So I'm saying that the league is full of high-performance athletes. But we only know a few of them because those are the few that were obsessive and fanatical. That's not normal, okay? There's some of us like that, but not very many, and particularly men. And men have a great reward at the end of that. After you strive and you become the best, you attract more mating opportunities, you attract more women, you attract more prestige. Now, as Christians, of course, we are not looking to have, 400 women and all that type of thing. But these men, they actually do that, okay? But naturally, inside the man, there is this drive to work. Females don't have that same incentive. In fact, as the other guy was just pointing out, Christopher Williamson, I think, he was just saying that as women tend to climb the hierarchy in terms of corporate life, they tend to alienate themselves because they are kind of pricing themselves out of the market because women generally, naturally like to mate across and upward. They're hypergamous, naturally. So they like men that are stronger than them, better than them, higher than them, that make more money than them, etc. So as they become greater and greater and as they make more money, less and less men are eligible as far as they're concerned. And I would also say that less men are attracted to them because men typically don't like to have women that are more bossy than them, that make more than them. Men don't feel strong and powerful and needed and useful for women that don't need them. So a lot of men might find them attractive, but might say to themselves, I don't like that dynamic. I don't like how that feels. Okay. So not that that's the women's fault or anything. It's just that that's how it is. So as the women excel in their careers, there's less and less men that are actually available to them, right? We are not the same. So men have that incentive. Women don't have that incentive to climb and to be extremely hyper competitive and hyper productive. So they say, I'm out. Right? Whatever. I'm out. I don't need all this stress and all this drama. For what? Let me go and get my children. Let me go and get some family. All right? Which is a sensible and reasonable conclusion to make, right? But again, feminism is trying to force this idea on these girls. And these girls only realize later in life, this isn't a good idea. Now, some of these ladies are quite clever and, they would have married people, their peers in college and in the workplace and so on. But a lot of people who are listening to this narrative of feminism do not actually marry, right? And they do not actually have kids and so on when they can. And then later on in life, they become very bitter and very regretful, remorseful. But let's listen to the rest of this because he's got some more important points to make.
Who's going to tell women the equal access to opportunity that you have recently just acquired? Actually, what that's doing is it's making it more difficult for you to find a mate that you're fundamentally attracted to.
Yeah, well, it does a lot of things. I mean, it does provide women with a lot more opportunity on the economic front. It does decrease their dependency on their mate in relationship to economic security. And educating women, countries that are willing to educate women, that's the best predictor of their future economic success. So if you look at developing countries and you want to find out what about a developing country is most likely to predict the fact that they will continue to thrive economically, it's their attitude towards the education of women. And a couple more things. Women's educational status predicts their children's educational status, but men's educational status doesn't. So that's also an important multi-generational effect.
Notice how he said that education isn't bad for women. In fact, those countries that do best economically are those who are willing to educate their women. Now, he also pointed out that the level of a woman's education can greatly impact the education and the life quality of her children, whereas the level of a man's education does not particularly affect the education and the lifestyle of the child. I don't have all the data as such, but it would stand to reason that because women raise children, right? I mean, of course, if you have a two-parent family, both the man and the woman are going to be involved in raising the child. But women have this connection to the children, especially at a certain age, where they have an influence on children, okay, in their own way that men don't. Men typically provide discipline and stop children from doing foolishness, okay, especially at a certain age. Women, on the other hand, they have more of a nurturing quality, a more of a enabling, pushing quality, and they are more intimate, to some degree with the children. Of course, everything is not black and white and everything is nuanced from person to person, parent to parent, child to child. Of course, some girls like their fathers more, some boys like their fathers more, some boys may spend more time with the fathers, etc. There are always these nuanced differences and so on. The point I'm making is that, not my words, the statistics say that women that are highly educated, that tends to affect their children in a very positive way. So, and this is my point, it's not that education for women is bad. It was never that. But remember what we said last week. All things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful unto me, but I will not become the slave of anything. What I'm saying by saying that is that God never said that women being educated is a problem. God never said that women working was a problem. But the mentality and the focus and the priority system that is operating in a person can yield completely different results. So if you are a God-minded person and you believe in God and you want to please God and you want to serve your husband and you want to serve your children and you want to build up your family, your education can be extremely useful and very, very powerful, even if you're spending some of your time in the workplace, okay? But that woman that's able to spend time in the workplace as well as successfully raise her children and balance it such that her children are the priority and her husband is the priority and the workplace is just second, not that is neglected altogether, but it's not the priority. The priority is my family, okay? And, I do some sort of job that is contained and not a high stress, completely time consuming job. I can still operate and still use my talents and skills, maybe writing, maybe translations, whatever it is that you can do. Maybe you can do it from home. Maybe you can run a business from home. Maybe you can do real estate. Maybe you can do online commerce, whatever it is. But the highly educated women that are properly oriented could be so powerful. And that's exactly what that Proverbs 31 woman is basically. Because the Bible tells us that Proverbs 31 woman was doing all sorts of things, right? But her family was the focus. Her family was the center of all of her work, right? It wasn't that she was trying to be better than her husband. It wasn't that she was trying to be, so fantastic in the workplace that her children got neglected. It wasn't that she was off trying to fulfill her personal ambitions such that her husband got neglected. You see what I'm saying? But obviously, if you read the Proverbs 31 woman narrative, it doesn't seem like she's uneducated. It definitely doesn't seem like she's in the background doing nothing. She seems to be highly effective, possibly highly educated, highly effective, and touching all the aspects of her life. In commerce, she considers a field and purchases it. The Bible speaks about her business and her commerce and all that. She's fully actively involved in stuff, but her family is her focus. You see, nothing wrong with women working. Nothing wrong with highly educated women. Nothing wrong per se with women going and pursue high-level jobs. But there is something wrong with neglecting your children. You see what I'm saying? There's something wrong when things go out of balance. So whichever woman you are and whichever situation you are in and whichever life outcomes you are actually pursuing, you need to approach life with some degree of wisdom and guidance, right? If you are enticed by the devil and you want to compete with men and you want to be better than men and you want to rise above men and so on, you're going to have a twisted, messed up outcome, more than likely, because you're doing something that God never really created you to do. That's not a place or space or mind frame that God actually deposited in you from the beginning as your natural programming. So All things are lawful. You can do anything you want, but everything don't make sense to do. And it is left to the person, okay, and their specific scenario to navigate the space as effectively as possible. But as I said last week, the key is to prioritize the will of God, prioritize the way of God. Let that be your orienting principle. Let that be your core launching pad. And then incorporate whatever else the world has to offer that is permissible, right? But don't do it the other way around, where you run after the world. Give me all the world. Give me all the world. Pursuing the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And then you neglect your natural longings and your natural programming that God gave you to see about family and that type of thing. Okay? Take a listen to this next part here that is so important. And I hope that my Christian sisters are listening to this and you are able to hear it with wisdom and with some maturity, because a lot of people can't listen to this. This is critical.
I released a video. I was going to conclude that other story. I released a video, or someone released a clip of me talking about some of the things we just talked about. And it went out on YouTube Shorts, and it's got like 5 million views in a month or something like that. And the comment section is unbelievably vitriolic. Every single comment is vitriolic, and it's all from women. It's like, who is this old white bastard telling us what we should do with our bodies? And I wasn't being judgmental. I was just saying exactly what I said to you, which is, well, I've watched women over the entire course of my life with, I would say, an affectionate eye. I love my sister. I love my wife. I have a daughter. I love my mother. I'm pretty happy about women, all things considered. I don't have an axe to grind in relationship to how they should conduct their lives. I don't even know how they should conduct their lives. I've watched what happens. And I've also watched what happens to women who hit 29 or 30 and then can't conceive. And that is not a fate I would wish on anyone. It's awful. And 30% of couples fall into that. 30% of couples have difficulty conceiving. It's a lot. And the probability that you'll have difficulty conceiving increases with age. And so, c'est la vie. But it's very interesting to me to see how vitriolic those comments have been and how uniform that is, because usually on my YouTube channel in particular, 95% of the comments are positive. And this is completely the opposite of that. So you brought this up at the beginning. You said 50% of women now at 30.
50.1 are childless by 30.
Yeah. Well, that's not good. That's a sign of something profoundly wrong with the entire culture at an extremely deep level.
I don't think that women need to take it as us trying to tell women what they should or shouldn't do, but I think that it would be very fair to say that you need to be an incredibly unique woman to make it to 50 without a family and look back and think, yeah, I did this right. That's not to say that those women aren't out there. They absolutely are. I know some of them. But I think overall that it's
the same with everyone, for everyone. I mean, this is another example of how our culture has just lost its moorings. It's like, well, what's life? Well, you have a job or a career, and hopefully you're productive and you contribute something to the community and you provide yourself and your family with the necessities of life. That's a quarter of your life or a third of it, something like that. You have an intimate relationship. You have a family. That's life. And if you don't have one of those, that's 1/3 of your life you don't have. Now, some people, maybe they're doing so well on the other two fronts that they can cope with not having that. Or maybe they're doing so well on one front, they can cope with not having two of them.
Compensates.
Yeah, maybe. It's pretty hard, because if you want to have a great career, it's hard to do that if you're alone and without a family. Right? I mean, the people that I've seen who've been best situated in their life, all things considered, even in relationship to their career, have a pretty solid monogamous relationship that stabilizes them. And then they have a family that also stabilizes them and broadens out their life. And, exceptional people do exceptional things, and good for them, but they're, by definition, given that they're exceptional, they're a tiny minority. This is always the argument between conservatives and liberals, right? Because the liberal types, they're more tilted sometimes towards, what would you call it, compassion or appreciation for the exceptional. And fair enough, the exceptional is necessary, but on average, what everyone does on average is the thing to do. And so you just look, you see, well, what do people do? Well, they have a job, or career, they have an intimate relationship, and they have a family. And if you don't have any one of those things, well, then you're treading water harder. Doesn't mean you can't do it. And it doesn't even mean possibly that you shouldn't try, but as a default presumption, it's just utterly foolish. What else are you going to do with your life? Well, maybe you're wildly creative. Fair enough, you know. That's extraordinarily rare as well, subject to the power law problem in any case, which is even if you're hyper creative, the probability that you're going to be successful at that economically is extremely, extremely tiny, to the point where it's almost non-existent. It's so difficult. Now, it does happen, and you can have spectacular success if you become successful. But
wasn't it that did you say last night, of the 100,000 most recently printed books, only 1,000 have sold more than 1 million?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's something like
Power law's all the way down.
All right, so winding down soon, but I just got one more video I want to show you. But again, he's just saying, look, you got to be practical about this thing. What is life really? Is life really about ascending to the top? You understand what I'm saying? Is life really about, oh, I can be the greatest? I want all the money. I need 4 houses and 10 yachts. Is that really what life is about? When really and truly, if you got the one house and one proper relationship and you balance your life properly, your life will be so much more satisfying, so much more gratifying. But the devil is trying to get everybody out here hyper focused on material stuff and hyper focused on success. And I'm trying to get money here and money there. Oh, I being successful. And oh, I'm making this amount of money every month. And oh, I got these 3 houses and so on. But their lives at the end of the day are broken because they haven't learned how to be in a relationship with the opposite gender. They haven't learned how to have proper, meaningful, deep relationships. They haven't learned to love and to love one another and to submit to one another and to be that one unit that God created us to be. We forsake the depth of the human experience that God has created for us for the trinkets and all these shiny objects that the devil is here dangling in front of our eyes on Instagram and Facebook and so on. God knows what he's doing, right? So he's saying, what's life really? Is it really to ascend to the top and to be working 80 hours a day to try to be the best person? Is that going to give you the life balance that you want? Exceptional people do exceptional things. There are not many Michael Jordans and Kobe Bryants. That's not for everybody. Leave that for the people that are like that. Those people can't help it, right? If you look at the life of Michael Jordan and you look at the life of Kobe Bryant, they were not normal people. They were obsessed with what they were doing. That's not most people. And that's quite all right. You don't need to be a super hyper achiever. Nobody is saying that you should be broke, poor, and, operating under your potential. But what we are saying is that allow God to set the parameters of let God define your life for you, right? Work with God. Don't be pulled by lust and ambition and selfish ambitions and stuff like that. Don't be stupid. Don't be deceived by the devil. What's life? He boils it down to life is being productive, having a career, making some sort of contribution to society from a financial and a skills-based perspective, having a significant other, and having a family. More or less, if you boil it down, that's what life is about. And if you find that you live the whole of your 70 years or so without a significant other, you might have missed out on a lot of life. And if you find that you live your whole 70 years and you had no family and no children and you didn't have that dynamic, you might have missed out on a whole set of life. Don't forsake the full experience just because you want to follow after the devil's little lie and then find yourself 40, 50, 60, no connections, no family, no love. You understand? And all you have to show for it is money. Ain't nobody interested in money. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Everybody interested in money, but money can only do so much. Don't let them trick you. Especially if you think of it, you can have your cake and eat it too to some degree if you are just a bit more strategic and a bit more wise. If you live your life in such a way as to still educate yourself, still become productive, etc., but in your younger years, 20, 21, 22, learn how to live in a relationship, learn how to submit, learn how to operate as a wife. Because being a wife is different from just being a female or just being a woman. Being a wife is a specific skill, is a specific mindset. The Bible says he who finds a wife is a good thing, not he who just got a woman about the place. The Bible specifically says it is better to be in the corner of a rooftop. It is better to be in the wilderness than to be in a house with a miserable woman. So you don't want any old woman. right? Any woman won't do. A wife is something different than just a woman or just a female. So in your younger years, you want to be learning how to be a good wife, and you want to be putting yourself in a position to meet good men. This is if you want to have a family. This is if you want to have a husband and have a family and so on. Not everyone wants that, but most women do. So if you want that, don't put it off till you're 29 and 30. Don't be thinking like the feminists. Think, okay, let me be smart about this. Let me learn how to be a wife, put my attitude in order, put my words in order, put my service self in order, nurturing self in order. Still educate yourself, no problem, but balance things. Prioritize your husband. Try to get married in your younger years, 23, 24. Have your children so that when you come now 32, 33, you already got your 3. With decent amount of space and decent amount of time, so you can balance your family and you don't be a baby machine for the next 4 years and that type of thing. You balance yourself out. And when you're 33, 34, you got kids and that type of thing, you can still be in the background working on your career slowly. As your children get older and so on and so forth, you can spend more time on your career stuff because you got less hands-on duties and you can monitor your children from afar off a little bit better. You follow what I'm saying? So don't be a fool. Now let's just take a look at this last video. It's very short, so bear with me. And we're going to see what this woman has to say. Take a look.
Viral attention for sharing her regrets about ditching the idea of marriage and family. Now, her article in Business Insider reads, quote, "I'm 38 and single, and I recently realized I want a child. I'm terrified that I've missed my opportunity." That woman's name is Melissa Persling, and she's revealing to Fox News Digital what she thinks caused her current situation. Listen.
I feel unbelievably betrayed by feminism. I was constantly fed this idea that women can do everything. We don't really need men. Women can have the great career and have the kids that they like and change the tires and do this. I mean, I grew up thinking, and men are great, but I can do all the same things. I do feel in many ways betrayed by that line of thinking. I kind of want to go back to some of those teachers and coaches and say, what the hell did you mean by that? Because women can't do it all. We can't.
Katrina, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, I'm going to go deep here. So I have a lot of opinion on this, and I really think that feminism in some ways has really sabotaged women's happiness. And the reason I believe that is because we are asked to do all these different things, right? But then our nervous system goes whack. I know for myself, I'm in work mode and then mother mode and then family mode, right? And so your system just completely goes out of whack, which is why I truly believe, and I found this quote and I thought it was so telling, is that the divine feminine is the rawest, wildest, and most honest mirror a man will ever encounter. The awakened man opens his heart and goes to battle. He will tame his dragons and face his deepest shadows, since he knows that deep within, her heart will guide him home. And I think that there is a beautiful balance between the feminine and the masculine energy. And I know that as a woman, regardless of what any woman says, I think she wants to feel safe with a man, and she wants to be able to feel her feminine energy, but it's very difficult to go into that space when you're trying to fulfill all these different roles, which is what I think this woman is feeling right now, which is what I think a lot of women, right, in very powerful positions are feeling. And then there's this idea that if you're powerful, you can't be, a beautiful wife or a beautiful mother. And so I think we need to go back to really the way God designed us to be, which is as women, we need men. And it makes for a beautiful balance.
Chris, something that struck me about this is something that Katrina mentioned earlier, which is your influences start in the home. So the moral of this story to me was that she felt betrayed by her influences. But if she had been influenced a certain way in the home, then there wouldn't have been confusion. Does that make sense?
It does, and I really like the points you just made. I think that, this is a little bit of a weird topic for me to talk about, but we grew up with parents. I grew up with parents that had my brother and I when they were in their early 20s, okay? And that was their decision. That was great. My wife, Lily, decided to, she's an entrepreneur. She built her business in her early 20s and early 30s, and we didn't have kids till we were in our mid 30s. And she struggled with this early on a little bit. But this is where I think, as a man and as her husband and her protector, I take my personal responsibility to be her greatest advocate and her greatest cheerleader for everything that she's doing, everything that she's accomplished, everything she has to balance as a woman. And I think more men should take that responsibility. Not that I'm on this high horse or anything. I'm just saying I do think that it's the role of a man to do that.
Right. So wrapping up here shortly. So that woman is there crying out saying, look, this thing betrayed me, right? I hear I'm 38. No, I don't got no child. I don't got no husband. I don't got no family. I'm not nearly as attractive as I used to be. I'm not nearly as fertile as I used to be. And now I don't have any of these things and I want these things and I might not be able to get them because here I am at 38. High risk pregnancy, something can go wrong with me, something can go wrong with the child. This isn't ideal. And she's feeling all sorts of anxiety. And she says, look, I wish I could go back to those teachers and those people that keep telling me this nonsense about do this feminism thing. What exactly were you saying? Because this hasn't worked out for me at all. This is only one of many, many, many women that have this feeling. And by God's grace, we may be able to take a look at some more at another time. But this is only one of many women that is like, I am not down with the results of feminism. This has not worked out for me, right? Because it was never about helping the woman. It was, remember what we looked at in the last videos. It's a satanic agenda to disrupt the family, break up the homes, destroy society, overthrow the patriarchy, if you want to call it that. That's what it's about. It's not about women's choice. You understand? It's not about helping women. It hurts women. It doesn't take the fullness of a woman into consideration. It has a very specific agenda to destroy things, right? It is not pro-woman, all right? And this woman is here, a classic example, right? She's like, this hasn't worked out for me at all. And I'm telling you, this is only one of many, 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 many women that will tell you the very same thing, right? The lady at the end, she kind of agreed and she said, hey, I think we need to go back to how God made it, right? She's saying, obviously, this thing isn't working, right? Now, the man at the end, you know, he's one of these guys, and I don't want to knock the guy because I'm sure he's a good guy. I'm sure he's a positive guy, but this is another one of those half-truth mess up, just say something nice for television, say something nice to appease people's feelings and to make people feel okay and to, you know, seem as a supportive husband and to glorify my wife and that sort of thing. Listen, you know, again, I don't want to judge the man, but that's bad advice, right? You don't want to be having your first child at 36. He himself said that his wife had problems with it. That's not what you want. And then he talked about he want to champion his wife. And so, you tell your wife, listen, if you want to have children, sweetheart, we better have it early so that you don't hurt yourself and that we don't hurt your children. You following after your dreams and you want this and you want that. Listen, money ain't that great at the end of the day. It is far more important, far better to have a family and to have children than to have a whole set of money. You understand what I'm saying? Don't be trying to be super rich person and super rich. You know how many people just bear 8 and 9 children and 5 children and don't got nearly the amount of money that we have in today's society? I'm not saying that that's good either, because that obviously can lead to stress and all that. I'm saying that he should not, he just got to say something nice for TV, but it's not a good idea to tell your wife, hey, let's try to have children at 37 and 36. Bad idea. That's poor. Tell your wife, look, if we can have them children, let's have them early. So there's less chance of damage to yourself, less chance of damage to the children, right? Let's structure things in such a way that, we don't offset our lives. They might not have been able to have, right? In that last interview, I don't know if we actually got to listen to it, but Peterson was saying 30% of people have difficulty having children. And as you get older, it becomes more and more and more difficult, right? So I can wrap it up here now. So basically, this video is for the young girls. This is in conjunction with the last video that we had last week, where I'm saying to you, hey, I'm not saying that God tells you that you can't read, you can't learn, you can't study, you can't pursue a career. But if you want children, you got to think this thing through. You don't listen to these feminist people and then pop up at 37 and say, oh, shoot, I ain't got the children. I really want children. And now I'm here with this pen and paper job and these foolish people in my office that don't love me, that don't care about me. And if I was to start performing at my highest, they can fire me and I ain't got a family. Don't let that happen to you, right? One of the things that Peterson has said was that when he made the comments about what he had observed, all right, a lot of the women in his comment section, well, it wasn't his comment section, somebody had clipped his video, posted it online, and it got millions of views. And a lot of the people in the comment section was criticizing Peterson for saying the things that he was saying. He wasn't insulting women. He wasn't attacking women. He was telling the young girls in his university class, hey, this is something you might want to pay attention to, because this is what I've seen. I've been in the working market for years, from a little boy all the way up to my current estate. I had fellow teachers that were women as I was teaching children. And as I came up as a psychologist and so on, is a female-dominated career. And I have children, and I have a grandma, and I have a wife. And what I've seen is that when women get to around 28, 29, their late 20s, they start to have a crisis. And then they get into crisis mode. We discussed this before, right? And then, sometimes they get into problems. And he says, look, this is something that devastates women when they recognize that they are unable to conceive, right? So this is for you young girls. Now, the Bible says, Proverbs 9, Bible says that don't correct a fool because he's going to turn around and hate you, basically, paraphrasing. But it says, correct a wise person, give instruction to a wise person, he will love you. The idea here is that Peterson was saying in his comment section, all these people were upset with him, but he didn't do anything bad. He was just saying, hey, this is what could happen. You want to be mindful of this. And that's all I'm saying here. I'm not telling you what to do with your body, what to do your job, and I didn't tell you all that. I'm saying, if you're a child of God, beware of this light that is feminism. Not only Christians, but anybody with enough common sense. Beware of this light called feminism, right? Do your best to pull that thing out your head. It's wicked and it's destructive, and it is not pro-woman. It is a satanic agenda to destroy families, to destroy society, to restructure society and destroy the patriarchy. It has nothing to do with you and your life and your happiness and your outcomes. Nothing to do with it. It is leveraging your pride, leveraging your lust, and trying to get an outcome out of you and then leave you devastated when you're 37 and 38 and 39. It has nothing to do with you. Don't believe it. You see what I'm saying? So these videos are for you to save yourself, right? Guard your mind from all this corruption and basically be aware of what's going on. Make a sensible decision, chart your path sensibly, and arrange your life such that you can have what you ultimately want. If you want children, if you know that you want children, if you know that you want a family, if you know you want a husband, prioritize that stuff in your younger years. That does not mean you have to completely neglect career and education, but it means that you should not neglect it, put it aside, and deprioritize it. All right? This is a word to the wise. This is to help you. This is not to hurt you or to control you and all that rubbish. It is to inform you and to help you to say, okay, I need to be more deliberate, more intentional about how I live my life and what I do in my younger years. I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm going to pray now, finish off. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you again for your word that gives us insight into the affairs of life, Father. I pray particularly for the young girls, Lord, that you help them to be wise and you help them to heed your word and you help them not to believe the devil. Help them not to believe a lie. Help them to learn how to get the best of the situation. Help them to learn how to get the best of both worlds. Help them to learn how to strategically plan their lives, plan their moves as much as we can plan because, life doesn't always conform to our plans, but help them to be intentional and deliberate about how they live and not to be foolish, not to be negligent, not to be unwise, not to be proud and arrogant and to think that life conforms to their will, but rather help them to be wise and to position themselves in such a way as to get the best outcomes. I pray, Father, that you help them to be humble enough to listen to wiser, older people. Help them to be humble enough, Father, to listen. Help them to be disciplined enough to take action. Help them to find people to help them create a path and to chart a path and to stay on that chart, Father. Help them to find good mentors, wise mentors that are trained and are skilled in your word and in your will and who are aware of the schemes of the devil and all of his perversion. So, Lord, we thank you again. Please help us. We are but children. You know that we are just dust. Help your daughters, especially in this area, Father. Help your girls and, just help your people in general, Father. Help us to avoid the feminist traps and all of the destruction that it is bringing upon our lives, the lives in society. So again, Father, we thank you for everything and we praise your name. And we just ask that you protect us and help us to have a great week and to come back here blessed and ready for more of your word next week. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hi guys, Joel Brooks here at the Insight Podcast. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video or found it informative, interesting, or helpful in any way, please give it a like and consider sharing it with your friends. If you want to stay connected, you can check us out at our website, insight.joelbrooksonline.com, and you can also check us out on social media. Links in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and God bless.